Hello everyone, I'm Posthuman, and today we're going to go through how to make every single drum from kicks to claps to snares to hi-hats to shakers. By the end of this video, you will know how to make drums like this, and even like this. Before we start the video, I would like to announce that I do have 3 free sample packs out right now, the newest one being Alien Base Volume 2. So you can get those all for free and linked in the description. But if you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe and turn on the bell so you get notified for more videos like this in the future. Also, I do have a Discord that will also be linked in the description. And you can get some free assets there and just join our community if you want to. Okay, so we're going to start off with kicks, and kicks are super simple. So we're going to edit the wavetable, right click, clear all, and start with a sine wave. We're going to bring this down to your subnote, for me it's 2 octaves, and we're going to set an envelope on the volume. Now this volume envelope should look something like this, and you can change this later on depending on how you want the kick to sound. We're just going to toss this on the volume, and that's what it should sound like so far. And remember to turn the random down as well if you want your kick to sound the same every single time you play it. Next, we're going to add a pitch envelope. So we're going to make an envelope that looks something like this, and we're going to toss this on the coarse pitch. And if you hold Shift, Alt, and left click on this, you can switch between bipolar and unipolar. So we're going to make it unipolar, and we're going to bring this up to 48. Now this gives us a nice little clicky transient that we can post-process to boost. Next, we're going to enable noise, and let's just pick a random one. Let's go sim loop. Now, I don't really like the way this one sounds. We might have to change it a little bit, edit it around. And you're going to just make an envelope that's going to play on the volume of this. So if I bring it up to 55%, it sounds decent. Next, we're going to go into the effects tab. We're going to enable compressor, distortion, and EQ. So we're going to enable multiband mode on the compression, and we're going to bring the gain up a little bit, and we're going to bring the release all the way up. This is super important, or else you might have this kind of ringing artifact at the end of your kick, which you don't necessarily want on your drums. You want your drums to kind of just be smooth and have clean tones to them. Unless you're going for super dirty drums, then you can crank up some distortion on there. On the distortion, I like to leave it on tube and bring it anywhere between 50 and 75%. So 75% is a little bit too heavy, so we're going to bring this down to 60. 56% sounds decent. And as you can tell, kick is super quiet right now. What we're going to do is on the mix of the distortion, if you click it, you can change it to a level. And we're going to bring this up a little bit. Oh, I'm playing on the wrong octave. So I'm going to crank this up to by 12 dB, and now we're going to EQ it. So I'm going to just bring up the high end a little bit, and we're going to remove some frequencies right around there actually, by just 5 decibels, cut them out. Now in post-processing, what you can do is you just click this green icon if you're in FL Studio, and then click track, and it will set it to a track. I like to start off my kicks with saturation, so I'm going to be using mSaturator, which is a free plugin. If you don't have it, it is super good. Get it. And I'm just going to play and mess around with the settings. So that sounds good. For next, I like to EQ, so I'm just going to EQ it, and remember to put it on linear phase mode when you're doing drums, because if you don't have it on linear phase mode, it can kind of mess up the transient and the tone a little bit. So I'm going to emphasize the transient a little bit around 1700 Hertz and bring this up by around 2 decibels. 2 to 4 decibels usually sounds good. And I'm going to bring down around 570 Hertz by 1.5 decibels. So we've got a clean sounding kick so far, and now everything else that you add on here is just for taste. I'm going to add a compressor I'm going to use the kilohertz compressor because it's super simple and fast. Just bring the threshold down a little bit and bring the release up. And then after that, I'm going to add a transient shaper. Use the kilohertz transient shaper because again, super simple, super fast, and also this speed knob is super good for making drums. So I'm going to bring this up around 25%, make sure clip is enabled. Let's see, just play around with it until you like how it sounds. It's too much. Around there sounds good, and then we can choose if we want a super clicky transient like this, or a super long one, like that. I'm going to go around 80% for this kick. Next, I think it could be a little bit louder, a little bit beefier, so I'm just going to add another M saturator and put it to soft 3. And this is our kick. So now what you can do is you can just put it into your piano roll and render it out. So cool little keybind to render out in FL Studio is Control-Alt-C, and that consolidates, and then you just click start, and boom, you got a kick. Now, I feel like this kick could be better, so I'm going to play around with it a little bit and just show you how you can get different results from changing parameters slightly. So this noise lasts too long, too loud as well. Change the noise up a little bit. Like how that sounds. Boost this a little bit more. And mess around with the pitch envelope. And boom, from this one patch we have these two kicks. And they sound completely different from each other. So kicks are super simple to make, and it's really just mess around with the sound until you like how it sounds. Now we're going to go on to snares, and snares are a different story from kicks. They are a little bit more complicated to make, but there's just endless possibilities with them. You can either have it pretty high-pitched or super low-pitched, whatever you want to do. So I'm just going to start out, same as the kick. Click here, clear all, and create a sine wave. I'm going to leave this sine wave at default pitch, and I'm going to make the same volume envelope as the kick, except a little bit shorter, around right here. And that's the transient. Now transients with snares, or that's the body. Now transients with snares are super interesting because you can either have a super fast clicky transient or a kind of zappy one. It really just depends on what you want to do. So I'm going to set this to envelope 1/8, and I'm going to bring this to around right here. Set it to unipolar, bring it up to 48. Now I'm going to have this as a super clicky transient, but if I move it up a little bit, we can have a super zappy one. So next, for the snare, you're going to want to enable the noise oscillator, and we're going to use this differently from the kick. We're going to use this as the tail. So for snares, it's really just choose through noises until you find one that you like, and I'm just going to choose this one because I use one on a lot of my snares and it sounds good. So we're going to have the tail start after the transient we're starting to ramp down. So we're going to fade it in like that, set it to envelope, and we're going to bring this out a little bit. We're going to put this on the level by around 75. That's what it sounds like so far. Super simple. That's all you need. Now, filtering is where it gets interesting. I'm going to turn this off of oscillator A. I'm going to set it to noise. And I'm just going to go normal, high 18. So the more you bring this resonance up, the kind of quieter the sound is going to get, because as you can see, it pushes the higher frequencies down as you peak this. So I like to leave it around 5 to 15%. And I'm going to make another LFO, and I'm going to have this as a ramp up. Very fast ramp up like this. So it gives our snare kind of a whooshing sound like. So now we're just going to tune this and play. I like how that's sounding so far. Next, we're going to enable the compressor, and we're going to enable multiband mode. Bring the release all the way up again, and play with the settings until you find something you like. We can enable distortion as well. don't really like heavy distortion on my kicks. So I'm just going to leave distortion off completely because I don't like how it sounds on the snare. And then I'm going to load up an EQ. And this is where it gets fun with snares because you can really tune how it sounds. I like to add a high shelf, and I like to modulate the gain on it, make it uniform. Just have it go up. So as you can see, it's bringing up the tail frequencies really nicely and slowly lowering them back down. And then with this band, I'm going to tune the noise with this. You can have it super bright or kind of like a breathing sound. For this snare, I like around 1350 hertz. I think it sounds nice, and I'm just going to bring it up by 7 decibels. This is what our snare sounds like so far. I'm going to send it to a track, and from here we post-process. Now with snares, you can be a little bit more creative than with kicks. I like to start off my snares with an OTT at around 60% depth, and the time up at around 800%. Bring the gain up, and then EQ. So around 825 hertz to 1000 hertz. I'm going to boost there. I don't need to boost the high end anymore. And I'm going to slightly boost around 400 hertz. Very slightly. And then I'm just going to remove the unnecessary low end. And remember, linear phase mode. So next, it's just toss on whatever you want before we get into layering to make the snare sound nice. So again, I'm going to compress it just very lightly. Then I'm going to saturate it. You can kind of see a pattern here. Just compression and saturation is really all you need to throw on drums. But you can get super unique with them with distortions and other VSTs. Whatever you want to throw in here, just throw it on and see if it works. Reverbs, just whatever. Now I'm going to go back into the Serum, bring the noise down a little bit, and edit the tail, or the transient. I want to have it a little bit clickier. And I want the tail to be a little bit longer. So just like that. It sounds perfect. That sounds good. Okay. And now we're just gonna mess around with the saturation. Try and get it as loud as we can without it clipping. And if we enable clipping at end, it will, when you consolidate it, it will just completely remove the transient. I don't know why that is, but it does that. So don't enable clipping at end. Now we're going to render this out and get into layering. This is a super simple snare. It's honestly pretty bad, but we'll roll with it. So we're going to render out the whole thing and take a look at it. So it's a pretty decent looking snare. Doesn't sound too great though, but we're going to make it sound better. What I like to do is just grab any clap. I'll use one of the default FL Studio claps just for this video. I'm going to use this one. And we're going to route this to a track. And I'm going to just drench it in reverb. 100% reverb. Bring down the time. EQ. And frequency shifter, because I feel like it can be bring up a little bit for this particular snare. Now we're going to render this, or not render it, we're going to fade it in a little bit. And we're going to render this out. And then we can adjust the tail accordingly with the faders. Now I feel like this clap's a little bit too loud, so I'm going to delete that. Adjust the volume of the clap a little bit. And then re-render it. And fade it out a little bit. And then boom, there you go. You've got yourself a decent sounding snare. And then again with snares, you can change it so many ways. So I'm just going to make a few variants real quick. Just by changing samples around a little bit, doing some random stuff. So let's see. We've got it placed on D sharp 4. Bring that down to B. Mess around with the noise a bit. And I'm going to add a little bit of some harmonics in here, just to give it a little bit more beat. I think I'm going to add some distortion in here. So 25% distortion gives us a little bit of a clickier transient. And give ourselves a slightly different transient. I'm going to run this out. So we're going to find the clap. And as you can see, this clap no longer fits. So let's try frequency shifting it back down. Let's add a EQ after the frequency shifter just so it doesn't get muddy. And let's find a different clap. Now I want the snare to be shorter, so fade it out, get close, and render it. And then boom, you've got these two snares now from that one patch. And you can change these around however much you want. And using these same techniques, you can get super cool results. Like these are some of the snares that I've made. These two that I made in this video aren't too good, I'll be honest. But like, I've got some really cool ones in here with some nice textures, with some nice tails. And just mess around is really the best way to get better at it. Is mess around with the transients, the tails, do whatever you want to do, and just keep making them. And that's how you get better at making snares. Now we're going to make hi-hats and shakers, because I feel like these can just go into one section as they are very similar. So with both of these, all you're going to want to do is start out with a noise. Whatever noise you want, I'll use the default Serum noise. And we're just going to make a slight LFO for it. Depends on how you want your hi-hat to sound. So if you want there to be a strong transient on your hi-hat, you just leave it default. I don't really like my hi-hats to have a super strong transient, so I fade it in a little bit. Now we can mess around with the pitch. Set it to 52, and then from here, there's 1,000 ways you can go. You can either high pass it or band pass it, depending on if you want a trappier, more resonant hi-hat or just a simple hi-hat. So I'm just going to go with the simple one, and I'm going to go high 18. Bring the resonance up a little bit, and bring the cutoff up to around 1,000 hertz. Until it sounds good. And then we're going to go into the effects section. We're going to enable a filter, and we're going to go with a combs. So we're going to bring the resonance up, and we're going to bring the cutoff up. So this is super important. If you want your hi-hat to sound deeper, and more metallic, bring it down there. But I'm going to bring this up. And really tone in on the frequency that I want to use. After that, I'm going to add a compressor. Bring the release up. Remember, it's super important. You're going to add an EQ. And now we're just going to mess around with the noise a bit. I think 49% sounds good. And from here on, it's just whatever you want to add, however you want to change this LFO. Have a little bit more trappier hi-hat. shorter. We can add a resonance peak in here. We can add some hyperdimension for width. We can add some chorus. You can even modulate the chorus. Just remember, all of these parameters can be modulated in any way you want to make it sound different. So you've got a super simple hat so far. We can have it open or close. Next, let's just change around the noise. Mess around with the Combs filter. This is sounding a little bit too noisy, so I'm going to bring down the volume of the noise. Bring up the frequency. And really hone in the frequency of where we're boosting. Now we're going to set this to a track. And this is just EQ, super simple stuff. I'm going to go EQ. I like to cut around 1000 hertz, just anything underneath that. Boost some frequencies. And remove some. Next, I'm going to add, there's so many ways you can mess with this. I just like to add a little bit of reverb. You can add convolution reverb. You can add another Combs filter. You can add so much, but I'm just going to go with a little bit of reverb, a hollow room. And then I'm going to frequency shift it because I think that'll sound cool. Frequency shifters come in super handy when making drums because you can do so much with them. And look at that, we've got a super trappy hi-hat. Render it out. And save this as a sample. Or even just use it in this project. Whatever you're doing, if you're making drums for your project or if you're just saving them for later. Whatever you want to do. Next, we're going to go on to shakers. So we're going to open another Serum. And if you listen to shakers, they are kind of constant. There's no same pitch to them. There's little imperfections everywhere. So really the best way to replicate those imperfections is with just random modulation. So I'm going to open the noise. And let's go organics. AC, Aircan 1. Turn off oscillator A, obviously. And just toss LFO 1 on the pitch. I'm going to say modulate it by around 10%. So we have a little bit of randomness in that pitch. And then we're going to set the source, we're going to go into the matrix, set the source for this to chaos 1. And bring the rate of chaos 1 down to around 0.5. So as you can hear, it's randomly modulating this now. Next, we're going to go just LFO 1 again, because we just removed the pitch from LFO 1 and set it to chaos 1. And in here, I like to make my shakers at faster BPM, so around 172 is what I usually work in with shakers, because it just sounds decent. And we're going to create some just random LFOs. Seem to work best when you have them ramp up and then go down like that. So, but we're just going to do whatever. But make sure that these aren't all the same volume. And we're going to set these on the level. This is modulating the pitch a little bit too much, so I'm going to bring it down to around 5. And I'm going to tone these in a little bit more. Make sure they're not just all kind of attached, you know? Keep them off grid as well. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to add those little bits of imperfections. So we're going to go misc, and we're going to add a ring mod. Now you may be like, oh, what are you doing? Trust me. We're going to bring this down a little bit. Around 20 to 40 hertz works best. And we're going to bring the mix down. Until you've just got a little bit of that shakiness in there. Now, these aren't really going to sound like shakers in Serum. Most of the work comes in post-processing. So I'm going to go open a compressor, multiband, bring the gain up, release all the way up, and touch back. Add an EQ, cut out everything below like 1000. Add some hyper for some stereo width, and add a light filter just to remove a tiny bit of that top end. Now you can, with the EQ, you can boost peaks with this to just give it a little bit more of a tone. And we can change around the pitch a little bit. And once you got something that sounds kind of decent, we're going to push this into post-processing. So in here, we're going to add an EQ. Really shape it how you want it even more. And then here's where the magic comes in. We're going to add even more imperfections. So I like to do this with a patcher, and we're going to parallel process this. So we're going to bring from FL Studio into FL Studio, and then also I'm going to add a frequency shifter and an EQ, not that one, and a EQ. And I'm also going to drag this into these. So if we play them together, it's just playing the same exact sound twice and layering it over itself. But if we bring down the frequency shifter, you can get some more just randomness in there. And then we're going to bring this up, and we're going to bring the volume down. This is what it sounds like without it. And this is what it sounds like with it. You can bring the volume up to wherever you want. And then you can add much more in here as well. You can say you want to add a reverb in the patcher, or you want to, let's say, M auto pan, free VST. Just pan it a little bit so it's slightly different, adding a little bit more stereo width. And then we can play around with this. The noise. Alright, so I'd like the organic ones. I'm just gonna leave it on Aircan 1. Noise pitch, bring it down a little bit. And you've got yourself a kind of decent sounding shaker. So now we can render this out. New pattern. Now obviously it's not going to sound super ultra realistic. You're making it in Serum. If you want more realistic sounding stuff, you can record them in like a microphone or something and then edit them. But I just like to make all my stuff in Serum. So we can stretch it out long because, you know, it's shakers. You kind of want a little bit of pattern and just difference in them. And play it out. And boom, you've got a hat and some shakers. And with this hat, you can just change it ever so slightly and it sounds super different. So let's say, bring it out. You get the pitch. And you have a completely different hat now. You went from this to this. So hats and shakers are super simple, and just mess around with the noise pitches and the ring mod, whatever you toss on there, and you can get completely different results every time. Now we are going to make claps, and claps are also super simple. It is just white noise being modulated. And you can either have multiple small transients, one large transient, however you want your clap to sound, you can make it sound like that. So we're going to just default noise, and we're going to make an envelope that looks like this, and put it on the volume. And you can already tell it's sounding kind of clappy. So let's say we want to bring up the resonance around 1000 to 2000 hertz, and I'm going to do that with the bandpass. And now it's already sounding even clappier. We can bring up the fat and the drive a little bit. Put on some compression, gain up, release all the way up. And you don't always have to turn the release all the way up. I just like to turn it up on my drums because I think it sounds better if I tab it down versus up. It's really all personal preference in the end. We can add some stereo width and play around with the pitch of the noise. Now route this to a track, EQ it, remove all that low end, boost some frequencies as well. And I'm also going to add an OTT on here. Put the depth to around 60, time up. And then from here, you can just go crazy. You can frequency shift it. I love frequency shifting claps. Let's say down 200 Hertz. Add another EQ to remove that nasty low end that it brings in. Let's say we want to turn this into more of a rhythm clap. We can add some reverb. And then let's saturate it. Render this out. Give it some space for the tail. And then let's make a few variations. So let's say I don't want the double transient, I just want one. I want less reverb on here, because honestly, I don't think it sounds too good with reverb. Different noise. So cool sounding clap. Render this one out. Let's mess around with some filtering on here. So let's say filter the tri-ring mod. EQ it. Add some reverb back in. More EQ. Oh, not bring the volume down. And render this one out. And boom, in, what was that, 3 minutes? Not even 2 minutes, we made 3 different clap variants that all sound completely different from each other. And you can layer these claps with hats, Foley, tails from snares. You can turn these into the tails of snares, as I showed you earlier. So let's see, let's just go in here, let's grab a random percussion. Let's say this metal one. I like the top end, but not that little first bit. Let's give it some reverb. And let's pitch it down. And now you've got a variant of that clap with some nice metallic ringing at the end. So there's so many things you can do with claps. Claps are super simple to make, but also one of the best sounds. So if you like this video, please consider subscribing and turn on notifications for more videos like this in the future. I also have a SoundCloud and a Discord server, so if you want to follow my SoundCloud or join the server, please do. I'm always welcoming new people into the server. And I have music on my SoundCloud as well. But yeah,